Hello. Okay. Gladiator 2. A film that I never expected that we would get. I mean, as a sequel to a movie that, for me personally, doesn't really need a sequel. I think that film, Gladiator from 2000, works beautifully on its own. And so I'm a little surprised that we've actually got a sequel, but I'm also very intrigued. The story was written by Peter Craig and David Scarpa. Now, Peter Craig co-wrote the screenplay for The Batman. He also wrote the screenplay for Top Gun Maverick. So there was hope here for this sequel, in that they would bring something that would give this movie a reason to exist. Because for me personally, like I just said, I really don't feel like we needed a sequel to that original movie from 2000, Gladiator. But you've also got Ridley Scott returning to direct, so I'm on board and I'm just really interested. I'm very intrigued by what it is that Ridley Scott felt like earned that reason to return to create a sequel to that classic. So the synopsis of Gladiator 2 reads: after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. So, I'm going to start this review out with my negatives. I'm going to start with what it is that just really didn't work for me. And one of the main things was, for me personally, I just felt like this film really lacked the emotional weight that that first movie had, that allowed that first movie to have that kind of emotional impact that it did. And for me, this movie really just lacked that emotional weight behind its characters' journeys. And a lot of it was down to how the narrative for me was structured, how this movie would just sort of play out. Along with the screenplay, everything kind of felt paint by the numbers. And there was just something about how the movie was shot, edited, and just how we are thrown into this story, you know, how we are introduced to the character of Lucius, played by Paul Mescal, which, by the way, Paul Mescal is great here. I just don't think the screenplay is the greatest. I felt like it kind of lacked a little bit of depth and humanity, kind of lacked the soul and sort of the humanity of that first movie. And I felt like everything, sort of every aspect of this movie, from the screenplay to how the narrative is structured and just how the movie is shot, it all just ended up lacking this weight that I felt like, this emotional weight that I felt like this movie really needed to have that emotional clout, that emotional punch that I felt like the movie was hoping, or what the writers and Ridley Scott was hoping to achieve. And for me, I just really couldn't care. For example, there are moments dotted throughout this movie where something would happen, you know, something tragic would happen to a character, but they wouldn't really linger on it long enough for us to really get emotionally swallowed up within the moment. They just felt like they were more concerned on getting to the next scene and just moving the story along. And even though you can see what it is they're hoping to achieve within the story with these characters, it wasn't, for me, really fully coming to life, because again, I just couldn't help but feel like it just all felt like it was paint by the numbers. We've got a very similar template to that first movie, which this sequel follows, but it felt less concerned about really emotionally immersing us into this world within ancient Rome. And that is something that the first movie achieved beautifully. For example, from a visual perspective, in how they would reveal the city, you know, the city of Rome for the first time. I will always remember that scene from the first movie, as the camera goes through the clouds and you reveals the Colosseum with Hans Zimmer's score. That entire movie had a weight behind it, not just from the screenplay, but through how the film was crafted in regards to how the world was brought to life visually, with how the camera was used through the editing, and just how the characters were brought to life and fleshed out. it's a very straightforward story, but one that has depth to it because you've got characters that are very well written, that have humanity, that have soul. Yeah, the similar template is there. They're using a very similar template and also doing something different, but it's lacking that weight that the first one had. And I don't really want to keep comparing Gladiator 2 to the first movie, but I just couldn't help but see what it was they were attempting to do, and it just wasn't really working for me. You know, it just lacked the authenticity and presence that first movie had. Like, again, just going back to sort of that moment with the original movie where you have the camera gliding through the clouds, and then you see the city of Rome for the first time. There's a presence about it. There's a weight about it. You are immersed within the world, and you feel like you're there with these characters in Rome, you know, during this time. And I just felt like that was brought to life beautifully. Yeah, it just lacks that presence. It lacks that kind of authenticity of what it is they are trying to tell you with its story. And I do feel a lot of that is not just down to the screenplay, but it's also how this story is told visually as well, and just how it's sort of put together through the editing. There was just something not quite working for me with how these characters' journeys were playing out, and it just felt like we were missing a lot of moments with these characters to really sort of fully understand sort of what it was they were feeling and sort of the emotions they're going through. It's kind of said in the dialogue, but again, it was very mechanical for me and very cold. And the evolution of the characters through this film, like with Paul Mescal's character, just didn't really feel natural. Again, just going back to that kind of the description that I used to sort of describe how I felt about this experience, which is it just felt very paint by the numbers. And look, I understand that the Rome that we are witnessing here within Gladiator 2, it's within a very different time. As Paul Mescal's character sort of describes Rome during a moment in the movie, he describes Rome as having this disease. And that is, you know, reflected very well through different aspects, whether it be just sort of the aesthetic or the portrayal of the emperors, that kind of overindulgence and the corruption. It's there, and I sense that, and I get, you know, this is a very different Rome, and that's one aspect that I feel like they do achieve, and it is sort of brought to life through different elements of the story, wherever it be the two characters, the two emperors that are leading Rome. But it just ends up lacking the emotional weight, depth and soul when it comes to the characters' journeys through this story for me to really kind of care and sort of feel the danger and the peril and that these characters are going up against, the danger of being involved with the politics and all of that kind of presence or impact and weight of what it is the characters are experiencing within the story is just not really felt, or for me anyway, just didn't really fully come to life.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And with that being said, you might think, oh, I hated this movie. No, I didn't. I didn't hate Gladiator 2. There were a lot of issues that I had with it, where I felt like the movie really just didn't work, where I felt like the movie really needed to you know, there are aspects about its story with its characters that really needed to work for this to have the emotional clout and reason really for it to exist, because I am one of those people that like felt like, did we really need a sequel to that original movie? But I didn't hate it. I was entertained.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And I was entertained throughout this entire experience. I had a good time. I mean, with all that being said, that's why I wanted to get my negatives out of the way with, because it just didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of this movie. It's a little bit of a different beast in many ways to that first movie. This one is all about entertaining. Like, you know, you've got that moment in the original where, you know, are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
And I just felt like Ridley Scott took that moment and it's like, this is what I want to do to the sequel. Let's just fucking entertain the crowd. And that's how it felt. And I did have a good time. There are aspects with its story that I was really interested in. I think there are aspects about its story that were actually quite clever. But it's how it's how the story comes to life through the narrative. It just wasn't working. It wasn't really fully coming to life. But I could see what it was they were attempting to do with the character of Lucius and Denzel Washington's character as well, and how sort of what his part within the story is. I found to be incredibly intriguing. I felt like it was a much larger focus on the politics side of its story, which really, really intrigued me. But again, it all just ended up feeling quite sort of paint by the numbers and kind of really lacked the impact that I felt like it needed. But I still just couldn't help but be entertained by this experience. For example, the opening of Gladiator 2, just like with our first movie, it opens with a battle. And it's very exciting, it's thrilling, it's intense. And a lot of that's just down to how they immerse us into those moments with the use of the camera and how the camera is used and just how they allow us to sort of really soak in what is happening. And that's where the movie really sort of truly exceeds or succeeds for me, really, when it comes to sort of immersing you into this world. And that is during the fight scenes, that's during the battles. That's when the movie truly came to life for me. And, you know, Ridley Scott would use the camera in a way very similar to how he used it in that original movie, and how he would position it. For example, you with the boat in the middle of this Colosseum, it's in the trailers, and there would just be little things like that kind of really helped add to the immersion and the excitement of these moments. And it's all aided by the performances from the cast, which is what allowed me to remain immersed within this experience, even though I had the issues that I did have with it. You know, you got actors like Paul Mescal and Denzel Washington. They are bringing these characters to life in a way that's allowing me to remain immersed, because to some degree, I suppose, due to how they bring these characters to life, is allowing me to care just a little bit, to remain sort of locked in with their journeys, even though I'm not really feeling it emotionally or feeling it in a way that I'm supposed to. You know, there are other aspects to this movie, like the performances and just how these battles were brought to life, that would just sort of allow me to remain immersed. And just staying on performances for a moment, I have to mention Joseph Quinn as Emperor Geta. He leads the Roman Empire, he co-leads the Roman Empire with his brother here. And I just love how he brought this character to life. It's quite camp, it's eccentric, it's very theatrical in moments, but he does a really good job of bringing a character to life in a way that makes you, or made me anyway, despise the character. And that is something that they do achieve with this movie. And again, it's just one of those aspects that I did like about what it was they were attempting to do with the story and his characters and the ideas that they were sort of exploring. Like, I mean, these two emperors are in a many way a reflection of the Roman myth, Romulus and Remus, and I like that. I really appreciated that. But again, I just love how they were brought to life, especially Joseph Quinn as Emperor Geta. I really enjoyed his performance, and the same goes for Mark Lucas, who plays a very limited role within this movie, a very small role, but whenever he's on the screen, I just couldn't help but sort of enjoy sort of what it was he was doing with the character. And I really have to touch on Pedro Pascal as this general. In fact, he's probably one of the only characters where I had some sort of an emotional connection to, an attachment to, because he managed through his performance to say so much about what the character was feeling, and just sort of the internal battle that he's got going on within him. And it's an aspect that really intrigued me by this story. And the same with Denzel Washington and his character and with what he's trying to achieve. There is something about how they're bringing these characters to life that really got me intrigued and was very interesting. But, you know, you'd get a moment with Pedro where he's looking at these he's looking at this landscape and he's saying so much, and I just remember thinking, right, okay, wow, there's something going on here and I'm interested. But then, just like those moments that I referenced earlier on in the review where I felt like they weren't lingering on certain moments where something tragic would happen to a character to sort of allow us then to really get emotionally sort of wrapped up into that moment, it would be the same with these battle scenes and sort of a lot of other moments throughout the movie where it would sort of build up, you'd have this momentum, but then it would have a very sort of anticlimactic conclusion to it. Like this opening battle, for example, in Gladiator 2, the opening scene. It's very exciting, it's very intense, I'm there, I'm immersed, I'm really sort of, I'm swallowed up within sort of the rush and the thrill of it all. But then it kind of just ends abruptly. And that happens quite a lot through the movie. And again, it sort of goes back to what I'm saying about how this movie just sort of feels more concerned about just sort of moving the plot along, and sort of, it kind of just skims across. And a lot of that is really reflected within the screenplay as well. And so even though the movie opens on what is a very big, epic, thrilling, exciting, intense battle scene, it's also quite a poor setup for its character, I felt, as well. Even though we are already acquainted with this character of Lucius, and I do think how they kind of weaved him back into this story, the idea I felt was clever, and I think there was a lot of ideas within the story that was quite smart and clever, but unfortunately they don't truly get their chance to fully come to life in a way that really ended up working on the screen. But it was very enjoyable. I couldn't help but not have a good time with this, and that's because there were a lot of other little elements throughout this movie, whether it be the performances from the cast to just how Ridley Scott would bring this world to life through practical effects. You've got actual sets and sort of real statues, very limited CGI. That does help with the immersion, but this definitely was a very different beast to that first movie as well. And look, there are people who are going to love this movie. It's gonna work for them a hell of a lot better than it did for me. For example, once the film had finished, went to the toilet. It was quite a large crowd. My showing, actually, I think it must have been almost fully sold out. And there was a large group of young guys in this toilet, and they were all talking very positively about the movie. Like, they'd had a great time. And I always take joy in hearing people having such a, when people have a positive experience with a movie like this. They were entertained and they had a good time. And that is great. But unfortunately for me, it didn't 100% fully work. I think its ideas on what it was they were attempting to do with his characters, just unfortunately for me personally, didn't fully come to life. But I don't want that to take away from how fun this movie was. It was enjoyable, and I had a really good time. But it's not the first movie, it's not Gladiator. But yeah, look, enough rambling on from me. They are my thoughts on Gladiator 2, and I would be giving Gladiator 2 a 6.5 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Gladiator 2, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I am a little bit behind on reviews. I really wanted to catch Anora and Jura number 2 last week, but I came down with the lurgy, and I'm still just sort of coming out of that, just for the tail end of that. So apologies if I'm sounding a little bit banged up through this review, but I'm hoping to catch Anora and Jura number 2 this upcoming week. And then you've also got Wicked that releases next weekend, that I'm looking forward to checking out. I've seen the show. At first, it wasn't a show that I was sort of really kind of wanted to rush out to go and watch. It wasn't really high on my list of West End shows to watch, but I ended up watching it and I found myself really enjoying the story. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how it comes to life as a film adaptation. So yeah, just another big thank you to all of those that have interacted with the channel, whether it be liking, disliking, commenting, subscribing. It just means an awful lot. I will always be overwhelmed by how many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek rambling on about film and TV. But yeah, I love it. I enjoy doing this, and it means an awful lot that so many of you want to sort of join me in that passion, that fun about with just talking about film and TV. I'm hoping to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm not sure if I'm going to hit it. Like I said, a big thank you to those that have already subscribed. It means an awful lot. So yeah, enough of rambling on from me now. Thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.